Okay, we have one more presentation before lunch. It's called Enhancing Safety Critical Class A Flight Software Through MCDC and Object-to-Source Traceability Verification. Andoni, I'm not sure if I can say your last name, Arregui?
Arregui, yes. Thank you very much. Welcome to the presentation with the worst name or most boring title, at least. So I'll try to do it a bit better now with the presentation. Yeah, my name is Andoni Arregui, and I work for a company called GTD in Germany. And I will explain you this. How many of you know a bit about or care about unit tests? Just to get you a bit. There are a couple of people, that's very good. Who knows about MCDC, structural coverage? Also quite a few. And source or object-to-source traceability? Okay, still a few, so very good. Okay, then I know where we are roughly. I'll talk a bit about the motivation we had for this activity we carried out for the European Space Agency. Then what do the standards say about this kind of things? And then what did we do? What guidelines and tools we developed here? So first of all, certain motivation for our activity. Yeah, this thing was supposed to fly yesterday. It will do it now in a couple of days. And all of us, I think, hope that it will work. This time it must work. So for the US space industry and especially also for the astronauts, of course. And that's really the issue that we are talking today. It is very important for the astronauts that this really works. It is about human-rated software, what we're talking about. If you have such a device with such a big piece of software, millions of lines of code where a couple of software bugs can bring you into real trouble and destroy the whole trust that you have in the software, you are really in a problem. Within this context, this very nice quote came up that really opens a bit the eyes in saying that we are not only building hardware with a bit of software, there's a glue here or there a bit, but we are really building complex systems with a lot of software in the end of the day. It is as much about the software as about the hardware. And we need to see how we build this kind of things properly as any other industry does when building buildings or whatever else. We need to reach this point. From a European perspective, we also care about human-rated software. Of course, maybe we don't do exactly as much as you do here, but we also do have a couple of missions where human-rated software is participating. This is a small overview. Maybe you will know most of those missions, and all of them have at least something which is human-rated. That's why we also care. Let's take a look what the standards say about this kind of things then. On your side, on the US side, NPR 7150 2D requires for Class A Category 1 software that CMMI Level 3 is achieved for the team developing such a software, and that IV&V is carried out on the software. On your side, if it's also critical software, or in this case a human-rated software, then the whole section 3.7 applies, and particularly MCDC structural coverage needs to be achieved. You know better. This is not exhaustive. You will know better than me, but this is just an overview of what is really required. This is just a quote of how MCDC is defined within NPR 7150 2D. I just put it here to compare it then to what ECSS is on the European side. What do we have on the European side? Pretty similar, but not exactly the same. So whenever we achieve a Category B software in Europe, what is still required when we want to promote that to Category A are two things. MCDC structural coverage, exactly the same as we have seen on the NPR side, but we also need the verification of the added object code. This is the way we call it now. It is about this, else called object-to-source traceability, but it is really about the verification of the object code that we are adding when doing this translation from source to object code. This is how ECSS mentions and requires what is required about MCDC. So whenever we have a Category A project, 100% MCDC. That's the goal. Else, you see, it's project defined. Usually, it means 0% of MCDC. It's just tailored out. This is the definition we have in ECSS for MCDC. It is very similar to the one in NPR. the thing is just a small note aside. This definition is what we call the unique cause MCDC, which comes from the avionics world. And it is a bit of a deprecated definition because what is more practicable is to do the so-called masking MCDC, which is also the one applied in DO 178 in the current standard in the version C. The spirit is the same, it's just a bit more pragmatical approach to do the things. This will be included in the new ECSS standards in Europe, but the spirit, again, is the same, it's just a small note aside. And the other thing that is required in ECSS is this, sometimes called object-to-source traceability. We have a very fuzzy requirement in Europe for this, a very fuzzy one, and it is a bit problematic sometimes, but in the end, the idea is that if you are not able to show that you can trace all the object code back to the source code, then you are required to show that you achieve complete object code coverage of what you have compiled. In the end, we're talking about the translation from source code to object code, but in this jump from source to object, some additional things are usually put in to the object code that we are flying, and it is about that. If you cannot show that all the object code traces back to the source, you can't explain everything that happened, then you need to look what else is being put there. It's about that. And this is what we call to verify what pieces of object code have been added in the production of the flight software that we are really flashing and flying. So the problem we have in the end, at least in Europe, this is really from our perspective, is that we are not really used to this kind of software. The requirements are there, but we are not really used to it. The problems are there. From the software engineering perspective, we don't really know how to comply with these requirements. We don't really know what needed to be done. And on the other side, we don't know exactly what evidences to produce. And from the product assurance perspective, sometimes they don't really know what to ask for. The requirements are there, but how can I see that if this is really achieved or not? Yeah, we have examples from the Europeans' perspective where we did it wrong. ATV had a couple of wrong assumptions to avoid doing MCDC. Those are smart people, but the assumption was wrong. And product assurance also didn't see it. For the European service module, it's the same case. They have an approach to avoid MCDC, and it's wrong. It's wrong because they lose the complete capability of MCDC to detecting errors. So it's a pity. And this is coming because of a lack of understanding sometimes of what it really is. The main concerns we have for such a human-rated software, once we did all the other software engineering properly, is that first, do we have proper requirements for the level of software we are developing? It's not the same to develop a category C software than a category A software. Is the logic really sufficiently tested? And here, MCDC jumps in to put an additional difficulty, a bit more difficult at least to test that. What else? Are we introducing other pieces of software, object code in this case, which we are not really aware of? That's why we need to verify that. And then have we platforms that are really representative enough when we do our testing? And the last step is if the IVV activities are really adequate to the level of criticality that we really have. It's not the same again for a software which is not human rated as for one which is really human rated. On the MCDC side, as we have seen, most of you at least know what it is. So just a complementary information maybe to MCDC. MCDC is an attribute in the end of the source code we have, the syntax we have written there exactly, the test set we have, and also the processor we have. All of them together define the attribute of MCDC we have. That means that if we restructure the syntax, we are changing the MCDC attribute of what we have, and we may be cheating. And this is a very problematic thing, but sometimes it is the chosen approach for many projects. If we have something like this, this would require 4 tests to cover MCDC. You see the condition there, A and B, or C and D. 4 conditions in a decision, in this case, 4 tests. 4 tests, to be noted, for masking MCDC, not for unique cause MCDC. Unique cause MCDC would take 5 tests to be done here. For masking, it's only 4. We can talk about that later if someone is interested. If we write it as this, it's functionally the same, but we'll get away with only 3 tests. And if later on we remove the second if with that test set, for regression testing, we won't see a difference. And that's bad. Then we defeat really the purpose of MCDC. You can do the test, but if you remove that and you have this test set of only 3, you won't see that the functionality is completely wrong if you remove the segment. The problem is that many projects go for this way and say, just to avoid MCDC, just to only if A, if B, if C, if D, and just do these kind of things, and then we don't have MCDC. We're done with only decision coverage. Much cheaper, we don't buy the tools, and so on. Wrong, because we break all the capability we have to detect errors that MCDC really gives us. The second part now, regarding the object code that we are adding when we produce the executable in the end of the day. Flight software is not only the C code or whatever code we have written. It's not only that by far. We know that we have the project source code, we have an operating system maybe, we have a standard library, but then when it comes to the flight software, a couple of things more. From the compiler, we get still compiler library pieces brought into the flight software. Did we put them in the design? Maybe not. Maybe we said nothing about those. And with the standard library, the same. We may not even be really aware that we are using or not a standard library. Maybe we say, no, I'm never ever writing memset or something like that. It doesn't matter. Sometimes they come in because the compiler decides to do so. And this is then the thing. Just as an example of what kind of things come there is that for integer arithmetic, if our processor cannot do 64-bit integer arithmetic, we will get from the compiler library functions into our flight software, which are not mentioned in the design at all. From the C standard library, even if we are, as I said, not writing things like memset, it could be that the compiler decides to put a call to memset there. Array bound checks in all languages which are not C, the same thing again. Quite big pieces of software that come into that. So, just a small example. If we write this statement in a function, A modulo B there, it's a pretty simple statement that we are writing here. When it comes to the generated object code here, we see that the compiler is introducing a function call to that umod I3 function. A whole new function, this may be not mentioned in our design, yeah, but there it is. A whole function that we are using, but if we do up there unit testing for that piece, we may write one unit test and we are done with complete coverage there, but there is a whole function we are not testing at all. We are usually not even aware that it is there. It's about that on one side. So we get function calls in when we compile something and link something. That's also an important step. And on the other side, the other thing is that if we optimize, we get the whole logical structure reshuffled. Functionally, it's the same, but it is not the same branching structure that we have in the source code. That means that the structural coverage we have on source code is not necessarily the same as we will have on the object code. And maybe we have branches we never, ever exercise. And it's about that. A for loop. A very simple, the simplest, I would say, for loop, almost. What do we get here in object code if we compile this? On the left side, what we see is a control flow graph in assembly, so in the object code in this case. And on the right side, we see it when we optimize it. On the left side, don't read the assembler, it doesn't really matter. But you see the blocks. Those are the basic blocks we have for the object code there. With one single test, we fall through, go once through a loop, and then we get out with one single test. And we test everything. That's for the non-optimized version. If we do in GCC, for example, O2, and we get it optimized, we get the result on the right side there. But there is a difference. There are two outputs there, as you can see. One test, the test that we may have written here, will only exercise the left branch there. The right branch may be correct, sure, might be, but we never tested it because nothing is bringing us to do this. And it's left there, but it is there. And this is, of course, the very simplest example that we have seen here. And these are parts where we cannot trace back the object code to the source code, where we don't know that the structural coverage we have done on source code is maybe not enough because there are other parts that we're not exercising. What did we do? Under a contract of the European Space Agency, we did a study developing some guidelines and tools to do this. Many thanks to our technical officer at ESA, to Andreas Jung, because it would have been impossible between the back and forth during quite a long time to get this properly done. If you're interested, the outputs are public. You can get them through the QR code there all the tools and also the guidelines, both things. And it's open to anyone. I mean, worldwide, there's no restriction. So now concretely what we did is, as I said, on one side, we developed a certain methodology, how to do this quite systematically at least. Sometimes it's tricky, but it can be done quite systematically. And so to show them how to cover MCDC, for that we have also a couple of tools, and the same also to ensure that the object code produced is really being covered or that we can trace it back. And for both things, depending on what you need in the project. And this is what the tools do. The things that the tools right now are not really qualified tools, and for this we are having a new activity with the European Space Agency. We're trying to qualify those tools to have a proper qualification for them, because again, it is about human-rated software. And we'll have a couple of use cases. We'll, for example, also try to bring to category A the GR boot component that Daniel was mentioning before. That's one of the use cases where we will apply this. It is also being used currently in some different projects, but I cannot talk too much about those. And that's what we have right now. We'll also take a look at the data, because here what I mentioned, it's a lot about instructions we have in the software, but data is also a very important component and many times left aside. So we're doing a proper study now to see how to do this kind of stuff, but for data to ensure that all the data we have in the software is also being exercised. This is the MCDC tool we have. And Doreen Prokop already mentioned this last year here, so I won't go too much into detail. We do an analysis of the structure of the decisions we have, and then this enables us to use GCOF as a tool, which is pretty normal in the GCC world, let's say, to do the structural coverage on the source code. We only need a couple of things to ensure that GCOF can do it then if we use this approach. But the good thing now is really that during this last year, with a lot of work, why is it not coming now? Okay. There we are. No problem. And yeah, on behalf of NASA, a guy called Jürgen Qualzwig did a very good job in bringing directly MCDC capability into GCC. This means that if we have a GCC-based compiler with GCOF, we can directly do MCDC without using the tool that I was showing before. This is very good news. We didn't do it. I don't care. We have a tool, and that's a good thing. So it is really a very good thing. It will be available in new GCCs, but you can take the patch and prepare a GCC on your own to use it. And it really seems to be a very good tool. We have been testing it a bit. It needs a bit more of work for sure, but it is really a promising thing. Yeah, and this is the other counterpart of it. On your side, we need something also to be able to assess what we have on the object code side. And apart from trying to get the traceability done between object and source code, sometimes we need also something to do then the object code coverage. And for this, we have a tool where we can show the complete object code of every single function we have listed in our design, and then show what has been covered within all the basic blocks and what not. You would get such a view where you still see which basic blocks are not covered. So this means which paths are not covered within the software, and where you will still need some testing to complete the coverage there. But at least it gives you a very clear view what you are not exercising in your flight software. This is maybe not for all the projects, but for sure this is the case for, I think at least for human-rated software. As I said, it is not really mandatory under NPR right now, but I think it is a very sound and very healthy thing to do. It is mandatory, of course, for airplanes, and I just wanted to present it so that you get a grasp of it. And I also want to show really that this can be done. Exactly as MCDC, it's sometimes a bit frightening. It can be done. You need a bit of a process. You need a couple of tools, but then it can be really done. It must not be such a high cost driver. Yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
I don't have any questions online. Are there any questions in the room?
For these identified red things, how do you test those? Do you have to write assembly, or because that's what's left over after MCDC, right?
Yes, this example, for example, is exactly a source code that has been tested after MCDC,
right,
and where still those pieces are left.
So how do you test those?
This tool is not cheating to you too much, so you cannot really do proper structural testing. you need to continue testing. Of course, this tells you a bit, and once you get a bit used, you see the structures, and good software engineer sees what is still left. But yeah, we don't want to cheat too much in bringing then the software engineers into only structural testing. So it's usually not that tricky once you know what is left.
Thanks.
Hi. So you mentioned I think a Geisler tool, and you mentioned GCC and the tools that have been written as part of this project. What other kinds of tool might be affected by this?
There are other, let's say, commercial tools to do this kind of things. Yeah. For example, for object-to-source traceability, there are tools by commercial companies. I think that none of them is now between the sponsors, if I'm not wrong, but they have been here also in all years. I mean, I don't need to mention that they're typical ones. So there are tools to do this, and our guidelines are also compatible to those. I mean, it's just that we want to have at least a set of tools to be able to show everyone that this can be done even with open source tools. But then you can take the tools you want, and the process applies exactly the same.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, yeah, thanks. Is the patch for GCC, is that already in the main line, or do you know when it's going to be in the main line?
I don't know when. I really don't know when it will be mainline. No, I cannot really tell you. But I said, I mean, it's really pretty easy to, I mean, we'll build our own. I know about other people also building their own. It's just, you take the patch, apply it, build GCC again, and it's really not that much.
Is it going in the main line? Do you know? Is it ever going in the main line?
Yeah, it is going to go mainline. Yeah, it is an accepted patch.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much would say that it will be, yeah.
Okay, I think we have one more. No? Good. Okay. Yeah, that's online question. Robert.
Okay, we've got one online question, the second one actually. You mentioned close ties to GCC. How much of the tool set generalizes to other compilers?
Yeah, again, I mean, it's a quite similar answer to the one we gave already. The methodology or the examples we have are based on GCC, and the example tools, the open source ones, are based on GCC. But the methodology itself is exactly the same way compatible to any other, let's say, commercial compiler and all commercial tools that you can take to do either MCDC and object source coverage. There's no problem.
The other question was, can you share a link to the tools you're using?
The link?
Yeah.
It is again on the.
It's in the presentation.
Yeah, it's in the presentation exactly. Let's go back here. Yeah, there it is.
Okay. Thank you.
As I said, they are not qualified. That's the thing. They are still prototype tools, but can be used.
Okay, thank you very much.